Welcome, everybody. GM. It's me, Corval, here today, running the show a little solo, but don't worry, I got some guests for us today. We're going to be talking about the recent Beets governance post in the Sonic governance forums. It sparked a firestorm, controversy, and conversation in the Sonic community. So I brought on the Beets team here, and we're going to dive into the rationale and everything else around this. So, guys, stay tuned. This will be a good episode. You'll get some insight on governance, some economics, and maybe you can use some of that supply side economics information from little kitty earlier in the video. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let me bring on the guys here. So today we're going to be joined by Jedi Rasta, Nolly, and Daniel. Hello, fellas. How are you doing today?
Yo, pleasure to be here, man. It was quite the intro, dude. Definitely bumped into the opening sound, and yeah, stoked to be on GM, man.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me today, dude. So we got Rasta, Daniel, Nolly. Can we get some introductions? Let's start with Rasta and let's go around. For anyone who doesn't know who you guys are, I'm sure most of them do.
Yes, man. I'm in Beets OG. Been kind of around the block, you might say. Phantom base, obviously on Sonic, and yeah, do primarily kind of marketing related work for Beets. But yeah, we're a tight team, so kind of cross-functional as well. So BD, community-based stuff and whatnot. Yeah.
But Jedi, your mic is classically bad. It's quite typical.
It's so bad. The laugh coming through. Jedi is I don't know what goes on, but every time he calls through his mic, there's something going on.
Yeah, his mic under a pillow, maybe. Drag is asking. Yeah, Ross, we gotta get you a better mic somehow, dude. But I appreciate that, dude. Beets OG. Ross has been around since the start. I remember him from the beginning. I remember all you guys kind of from the beginning. We kind of got history going all the way back to fandom. Nolly specifically, we worked on LearnFi a little bit, but Nolly, introduce yourself to the people for us a little bit.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us on. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Nali. Go by DeFi Nali on X. I first maybe entered the Phantom ecosystem way back when kind of everything was popping off really. And I ended up actually entering the space just by explaining all the protocols which were popping way back in the day when Phantom DeFi Summer was absolutely huge. There was Phantom Unchained back then. And yeah, actually the first entry into the space was kicking it with Corval and some of the Byte Masons building LearnFi, which was like I'm not sure if some of you guys remember, but it was like a little educational hub, educating people on like the basics of DeFi and whatnot. Yeah, and since then I joined Beets and have been with Beets for the past few years, just hustling it like everyone has been in DeFi through the ups and downs and whatnot. But yeah, I work on lots of different things at Beets, the marketing, explaining how things work, some of the strategy, some of the treasury stuff and whatnot. My position has slowly kind of adapted with the market and how things have changed. But yeah, pleasure to be here, man. Pass it over to Dan.
Yeah, Daniel, let us know, dude. Tell us who you are, where you come from, what you're about, and all that stuff.
Cheers, man. Yeah, guys, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for giving us the chance, Corval. I'm Daniel. Yeah, I'm one of the original co-founders of Beets, so I've been here since the start of this beautiful journey. Yeah, mainly just a dev. I think a lot of people maybe don't have the context, but also Beets operates as a service provider for Balancer. And in that role, essentially what I do is I act as the CTO of the Balancer ecosystem, where we help to lead the development of Balancer V3. So yeah, do a little bit of everything, but mainly I'm just a dev at the end of the day, dude.
Right on. Okay, cool. I think that's some interesting little insight there. I think most people do just think of Beets as the DEX, multiple DEX on Sonic. Could you give us a little bit more information about your guys' relationship with Balancer? You said you help develop and maintain V3.
Yeah. So Beets kind of started, if you guys remember back in the day, as a fork of Balancer V2. And then kind of early on, we became a friendly fork of Balancer. And what that meant was that on Phantom, we essentially had exclusivity, like endorsement by Balancer. And there was a token deal that we made with the Balancer DAO. And that kind of built a relationship with the Balancer DAO that has kind of like sustained for the last 4 years. And I personally have like a pretty long history in tech leadership. And at some point, they essentially just had a gap that they were trying to fill. And I think not just me, like most of the Beets contributors, we helped to build Balancer. Essentially, we started kind of like at the end stage of V2 and really started on ideating what V3 could look like. And then slowly over kind of the period of kind of 6 months, and I think probably now for the last 2 or 3 years, just kind of been, I mean, it's like whatever you want to call it, but like tech lead, CTO for the Balancer DAO. That, and I think that it's like a really interesting kind of like cycle, because like everything that we get to do on Balancer, and that's why oftentimes it looks quite similar, but we help to build Balancer, and then that also kind of like contributes back to Beets and also relationships, partnerships. That's why we get to do quite a lot of cool things, because I would say the Balancer is better funded than Beets is. It's just a much bigger project, and then we can spend much more on tech innovation that then also feeds straight back into Beets. And then we get to also build other things, like cool things on the side, like STS, loops, like other new products that are coming. So we can kind of like build out quite an interesting product suite. And that's mainly what we spend our time doing, man.
Interesting. Very cool. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's like some interesting and important context here is you guys are, you know, started off as a fork, but have kind of worked your way more upstream, and you're kind of have a very, very, very close direct relationship with Balancer team and DAO and organization, all that. So let's start setting the table a little bit more specifically for our topic of conversation today, which is the very controversial governance post. But I think to really understand it, we have to go back a little bit. We have to understand the Beets business, and then I think we have to understand the Balancer hack. We have to understand Staked S. So, I mean, I don't know which one of you guys wants to take this, but let's start off with, say, you know, I think we kind of have a decent idea of like the Beets business after that little that little explanation by Daniel. But let's talk a little bit about the Balancer hack that recently happened. What actually happened? How did you guys respond, and how did it all play out? We all kind of know, but let's get the story out on the table again.
Yeah, I might start and then I'll kick it off to Nolly maybe. So if you think about like the fundamental issue, so their Balancer V2 supports many different types of pools. So we had a stable pool, we have the weighted pool, there was the LBP, there's several different types of pools or invariance curves essentially. And specifically one type of pool, which is called the composable stable pool. There was a rounding error in that pool. And this is a piece of infrastructure that's been around for more than 4 years. Because if we look at the size of the hack across many chains, it was massive. There was a lot of essentially faith that had, or essentially Lindy that had been built up over many years of people using this thing, it's surviving, and then people then continue to use it. It attracts TVL and then essentially kind of creates this wheel. You're gonna have to the days they blur together. It was November 2nd or November 3rd. Mm-hmm. Essentially, there was a multi-chain attack on this pool. An actor, a group, it's unknown, found this issue, and they performed an exploit that withdrew a significant portion of the funds from specifically V2 composable stable pools, and they did it across many chains at a single time.
Yeah, that's crazy. So they did it simultaneously on multiple chains on all these different deployments of Balancer. And so this was a pretty old bug that kind of flew under the radar, pretty old vulnerability. What has been like the general Balancer response around this since it's hit so many other chains? You know, I know we're on Sonic, but I kind of want to get a feel for how Balancer has been handling it elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at like what happened, it kind of showed that like maybe you could call it like different levels of decentralization, or like the willingness of the networks to step in. On Polygon, what essentially happened was that they decided to censor any transaction from the exploiter's address. So essentially halting him, allowing him not to move, essentially, until they could figure out how to get the funds back. On Berachain just shut down the chain. They did a hard fork, and they took the money away from him. On Gnosis chain, there was also a vote, and I'm not exactly caught up with the current status, but essentially it's similar to doing a soft or a hard fork, where they're essentially trying to retrieve the funds specifically from that address. There was several protocols that stepped in. Many millions were essentially like clawed back in whatever way that they could be. But obviously there was a lot of assets that were unable to be, I mean, as soon as you get into ETH, for example, or into Sonic, like it's very hard to stop people. And obviously a lot of money was essentially, it's not, I wouldn't say lost. There is still quite a lot of ongoing investigation effort, stuff that is not like, and that we cannot talk about here, but essentially like the goal is and continues to be to get those funds back. That if a mistake is made, this is a lot of money. It's not easy to move this amount of money. If a mistake is made, law enforcement has the opportunity to intercept. Not to say that that is going to happen, but it is our hope. And we are working with all parties to make sure that at least we are set up for that to happen.
Yeah. Okay. So we can kind of think of it as like there's two levels of response. I mean, there's varying types of response, but the levels that we can respond to it on are like primarily the network level, and then like the legal financial level, I suppose. Like how we're thinking about it is like on-chain activities specific to each chain is going to be able to have different kinds of approaches. And you know, we also have this kind of SEAL Team 6 thing, investigating, trying to figure out where the funds are going, maybe stop them before they're off ramped or something like that. Now,
exactly.
We have like, you listed a couple different approaches. You got like Berachain doing a split. You said, I think Polygon freezing funds. On Sonic, they try to freeze the funds as well. But before we get into what happened on Sonic, which of the approaches do you think was the most I don't know, aligns with y'all's philosophy of DeFi, a blockchain? Do you think the hard fork? Do you think the freeze? How would you have handled things on your end if you had the power?
Yeah, you take that one, buddy.
No, I was just gonna say, wow, what a loaded question. I mean, like it essentially goes down to like, I mean, I guess the aspect and the ethos of DeFi which we all resonate with. I'm saying we, maybe not speaking for everyone, but it's the idea of you've had these centralized systems in the past that have blown up and have failed, and it's been kind of the everyday users who's had to like pick up the scraps and takes the hits. And what kind of allured me to DeFi was the idea of actually we can kind of like decentralize the risk and decentralize it in a sense, so it doesn't just need one party to fail for everyone to be broken, or actually to take huge financial losses. I think when it comes to DeFi, the thing is with these systems is what naturally occurs in history and what naturally occurs just in evolution is you have a system, something breaks, and then it would naturally decentralize. And it decentralizes actually by like a natural cause. It becomes more robust and resilient from that. What we have in DeFi is we've built decentralized systems straight off the bat, but they actually haven't been stress tested, haven't gone through this like natural evolution of decentralizing from working out what's gone wrong and then reinforcing around it. So it comes to the question of like, if there's a hack in this instance where there's been millions of dollars which have gone, do you stick with the ethos of DeFi and not allow a chain to step in and go, oh, we could actually freeze those funds and give them back to the people, which I guess is very different from a bank blowing up or whatnot, actually the bank's kind of stepping in this instance? Or do you actually just let the centralized actor come in and do those things? And I think it's been actually a really interesting case where we've had all these different chains take different approaches. And I think there is an argument to be made for when the system does blow up, or there is a mistake which is exploited or a bug which is exploited, you can have some sort of mechanism that acts in place, which gives some kind of centralized power to a perceived trusted party, which has behind the scenes some sort of decentralization to come in and make that decision and rescue those funds. A long way of asking, yeah, I'm not sure on the exact one which I think was best, but I do think that it's been in the favor of everyday people who have had funds which have been exploited for a centralized party to come in and make a decision in some respect. Saying that, I do think there needs to be some kind of decentralization in the background, otherwise we kind of lose the whole ethos of the space. But I'd be very interested to hear Dan's opinion on that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like if you think about when this code was written, like DeFi was in a different state, you know. I think if we think back to 2120, like there was this fundamental. I mean, even if you think about like Andre's perspective, it was permissionless, it was immutable, and it was self-custody. But the thing is, like, the landscape evolves. Like, I think like, I'm not sure if you guys ever played Diablo 2 back in the day, but there's this like hardcode mode where you couldn't die, you know, like once you die, the game is over. And the thing is, like, that's what you're playing here. You put this code on chain and you can never change it. You can never touch it. You can never move it. But people put money there and they leave it forever. But landscape changes. Essentially threats that you didn't even know existed, they come up. And how do we kind of like meet this and kind of like look to like not necessarily introducing controls, but mitigations, I think, is something at least that I personally take away from this experience, is that like maybe the fact that something stays on chain forever that can never change is maybe not the right thing. Maybe should always be a way to just pause it, not take people's money, but at least like prevent other people from taking action against it. And I think that it's just, for me personally, just been a big reflection moment, and something that I continue to kind of like evolve on personally.
Yeah, interesting. I think there's some really good points, and it's something I feel like we've talked about quite a few times when it comes to hacks. This idea of like there's an ideal of like decentralized finance, right? Where we launch a product and it's perfect, a perfect contract, unassailable, it works completely as intended, has no vulnerabilities. But it's kind of like a fool's errand, right? It's a little too pie in the sky. Is that even feasible? And so there kind of needs to be some sort of meta or additional controls to account for risk, right? Randomness, things that we don't know are going to happen. And it seems kind of like what you guys are getting at is like, that's not bad. It's not bad to have these controls, right? It's not necessarily bad that Barachain hard forked or Polygon's freezing or Sonic's freezing or whatever, but there is a little bit of need for there to be decentralization behind that decision-making process, perhaps, right? A little bit more. This is the whole point, right? This is why we have a governance forum, is kind of what I'm getting at. Is this is kind of the way you kind of need something to act immediately. This is the classic governance problem, right? Between a democracy and like a tyranny or whatever. The tyrant can move very fast, and a democracy they move very slow. So you need something that move very quickly and decisively when something like this happens. These hacks happen in what, seconds or minutes. They're very fast. You have to react very quickly. But yeah, the decentralization part is a big part of it. So let's get into like the actual discussion here about what happened here for us. There was some controversy about this around the funds being frozen initially on the Sonic side, and then something happened. Could you guys explain, like, on your end, what happened here? Because I thought the funds were frozen and now they're gone.
Yeah. Happy to take this one. Yeah, so it was obviously, I mean, I hope that no one has to go through these moments, but in these moments, it is pure chaos, essentially. Not only are you trying to figure out what's going on, but then also like you have millions of messages rolling in of different types of groups that are trying to support, but then also scam and take advantage in these moments of weakness, essentially. And you're just trying to put out fires left and right. In this moment, Sonic essentially stepped in to try to mitigate the situation, which was for us a huge boon. Like, we were incredibly thankful for their willingness to take that quote unquote risk. And what they did was they zeroed out the balance of the attacker's address or the exploiter's address, and they essentially deployed a smart contract onto that address that would not allow it to receive any more S. And then the understanding at that moment was that not having S, obviously they could not submit a transaction to then move those funds. In hindsight, everything is like super clear. Obviously STS, we put the permit function on STS, and what permit basically does is it's the ability to essentially give permission for somebody else to move your funds, but you don't have to submit that transaction. And that can be done without submitting a transaction to the blockchain. Several days went by. In that time, obviously, we had many things going on, but it was missed. Obviously, this fact was missed until it was essentially too late. I think even if it had been seen, I think potentially it was a step too far anyways. Like, there isn't really a way. The only way that like that could have been prevented they would have had to actually move the funds from this address. We did not have the power to do it. The STS contract has no way for us, at least within the time window that we had. With a longer time window, we could have. But I don't think it would have even been appropriate for Sonic to do such an upgrade. I think it would have potentially even been a step too far.
I see. Okay. Yeah, it would have been a step too far. So the funds are gone now, right? It's so unfortunate, dude. It's so unfortunate in that it seems like it had like everyone had kind of a moment of like where the biggest problem was the ethical or philosophical implications of the funds being frozen, and then for them to still be pulled is like literally getting like rugged, pulled out from underneath us. I think Benny has a good comment here, but I'll save it for later, because I want to talk a little bit about like what is the actual impact. Like, can we get some either numbers or some feel for like the impact that this has on the Beets protocol, the Sonic network? Like, what is how much money are we talking here? How many users? Does this pose like structural risks to other projects, this liquidity being ripped out?
Yeah, sure, I can jump in on this one, man. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest structural impact was that obviously this hack affected Balancer across lots of different deployments and lots of different networks. The pool that it predominantly impacted on Beets was the STS wrapped S pool, which I'm sure people are aware we also run STS. And this pool actually stored or facilitated almost all of the liquidity for STS swapping between wrapped S. There was actually, I think, near enough 10% of all STS in circulation was in this pool. So when the exploiter actually managed to hack this particular pool, he essentially made the current liquidity on the chain to swap in and out of the largest LST almost non-existent. I mean, maybe coming back to the point around like why you need an LST on your chain, I think we already all know that an LST is, if you're coming from a user's perspective, you maybe want to come and generate stablecoin yield, and then the next thing you want to generate is yield on the native asset. And STS is that asset which people chose to do that. And the place that you go to, where can I deploy my STS and generate more yield, is you go, I'll go to the LP on the network. So I think the biggest impact is actually you had some of the network's longest like standing users. You had some of the biggest liquidity providers on the network. You had the everyday people who were going, I just want to generate some safe yield. in a pool which has lasted for 4 years, has some of the biggest audit firms auditing it, has some of the biggest bug bounties possible, on a network which has showcased itself. So the biggest impact was, not only was Beets impacted by this hack on a contract which is 4 years old, but also the actual whole network and the whole chain was impacted. The one pool that it hit was probably the pool that was deemed to be the most safe to generate a base layer of yield. So I think that's kind of why it was such a big thing on Sonic. Obviously, it was big on these other chains as well, but it predominantly hit the LST, which is kind of a key underpin of a network. Yeah, I'm not sure if Dan, you want to build off of that point.
No, I think that was great.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong point to make here, that this was kind of considered the like low risk kind of pool, right? To get some yield, as low a risk as you could maybe like feasibly believe you're getting in high risk DeFi stuff. So what you're talking about is the types of people affected are going to be the people that are most likely to leave, most likely to give up on DeFi entirely, basically, because they're looking for the safest thing and they get burned, right? I think that's a good point. When we talk about, because I've seen a lot of people talking about, there's like lots of conspiracies, right? There are lots of conspiracies that this is like all labs lost all their money in this and they want to save it. But it seems like more likely that this is like the most visible, safe thing. And if it is completely, pillaged, it's not a good look for the network. It's already kind of been kicked in the ribs a bunch. So let's go into, go ahead, Nolly.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, man. I mean, like, I think, yeah, there's been these points around it being labs protecting their bag, and that is definitely not the case. I mean, even if you just go into our Discord, like, there's everyday users who've been here way back since the Phantom days. Like, literally, way back when, I remember speaking to them even just on Twitter. Like, if you're a user and you come into a network, you go, let me take the native asset, let me put it into an LST, let me put it into an LP, and that was that pool. So there's I mean, I'm sure there's people listening who are hit. There's a guy in the comments. I think it's the idea that this is purely labs protecting themselves is completely false. So yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, like, there's people maybe in our Discord who said that, like, some of the comments around, they've maybe felt like, why are people maybe not seeing that there's everyday users that are in these positions? So yeah, maybe just wanted to clarify that point on backing some of our users who have definitely been hit and are feeling it in our Discord.
Yeah, and I think on your governance proposal here, I think you actually have don't you have the affected LP address list, so you could kind of see like all the different kinds of wallets that are hit, all the people that are hit. It's a pretty wide range of small to large sizes, old and new users. And I think that's an interesting point that I hadn't really considered for a little bit, but this is kind of like, I don't want to sound, maybe it sounds like condescending, or it's like almost like baby's first DeFi foray project, right? Like if I'm checking out a network, the simplest thing for me to do, stake the asset, pair it with another asset, and go, right? Benny brings up a good point. There's everyday users in every exploited protocol. And I think that's going to be that's another critique that we see a lot is are people like, there's plenty of hacks that have happened on Sonnet, even in recent memory. Why this one deserves reimbursement or some sort of deal as opposed to, say, multi-chain or I don't know, other ones. Stream. So yeah, I guess it's a challenge for you guys. Like, why this one? Like, the proposal. What's the argument you guys have?
Yeah, I think that we have like two main points. I'll touch on the first one and then hand it to Nolly. Like, I think like what Benny said earlier kind of speaks to why this kind of went higher than the protocol, is that kind of it happened, and then there was network level attempted mitigation. So then it kind of spilled over outside of the protocol and into the network. And I think that this is why we kind of like, we see that this like, it essentially kind of like expanded the impact, expanded the net essentially. And then there was the messaging that I think, like you said before, is that we all kind of thought that we were safe, that was shared from Sonic, and this ended up to not be true. And this kind of steps into why we think that it, I mean, for better or worse, like it kind of elevates itself to also a network problem as well as a protocol problem. I think that there's this layer, and then there's specifically like LST liquidity and the health of the network that I think that Nolly can speak to a bit better than I can.
Okay. So real quick, just to summarize that kind of that point there, look, we're in the trial, we're in the courtroom here. The argument being that when labs intervened, they kind of made it their business, right? When they decided to freeze the funds, and then when they failed to actually stop the funds from being moved, it kind of took some of the onus or responsibility for this on themselves, as opposed to like a typical hack. I hack, let's say if I hack Shadow tomorrow for $1 million, it's between me and 24 to sort it out. But when Labs puts themselves in the middle, now it's another party, huh?
Yeah, I think what Dan was explaining is essentially it moves from just a protocol level impact or a protocol level issue to actually a network stepping in. It becomes tangentially a network level issue in a sense. There is the risk vectors which have affected the whole network, which is why we maybe feel this is different, and how the whole forum proposal came about. I think another point to make is, which I made before, is it was not only just like the network stepped in, it was also like it was the key liquidity source, or one of the key important foundations for Sonic, was STS and was S in general. And I think when you actually have the largest source of that liquidity being hit, it does actually impact the network, in a sense that for any network, your key liquidity is the native token, is the LST, and is stable coins. And if you're looking to build a base and grow throughout the next few years, you need those foundations to be secure. So I think those two things, when they underpin together, is you have a network stepping in, and you also have one of the actual foundations for like any sort of network to continue to operate as far as an LST. Those are kind of the two reasons why we kind of saw it was becoming something different. There's also a third point where it's like balance of contracts in general. As we said, they've been about for 4 years. They were literally some of the most battle-tested, Lindy proven contracts in existence. And this was a DEX level exploit which hit the actual STS, which hit the LST as well. So I mean, it's an exploit which happened. There was actions taken by the network to try and mitigate it. Those actions didn't work, and it became a network level issue. And then it actually impacted the LST on the chain as well, which we think is kind of the key thing, which is important here, is you need this LST not only for just liquidity in the chain, but actually like downstream effects. If you have huge protocols such as Aave, where they're actually kind of evaluating what they're doing with these chains right now, they're evaluating actually like unwinding and taking down deployments on certain L2s, and different networks, just based off of revenue, based off of TVL. And I think we can all look at Sonic and see when Aave deployed and see how the impact it had on the chain and how much liquidity they sourced. And I think we're in this time where we're looking for Sonic to grow and build a base. One of the key things we need to do is build those foundations. And those foundations are DEXs across the board, they're LSDs across the board, and their lending markets across the board. But there's definitely no questioning that Aave is undoubtedly one of the most important lending markets in DeFi in general. And there's no question that STS is one of the most important LSTs, or the widest distributed LST on Sonic right now.
I see. Now, Fallout Zone is a little skeptical here. He's saying, and giving Beets the money will keep them around, which I don't think it's necessarily the most accurate way to think about it. You guys aren't just getting S in your pockets, it's going into a locked LP, right? So it's almost not even, it's almost like it's like reimbursing the users, but still they're locked and they weren't necessarily locked beforehand. So it's not necessarily a payday, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to clarify this point, the idea is that these funds would go into a locked position of a pool token, and this pool token would be something called an Aave boosted pool, which is essentially an LP where you have wrapped S on one side and you have STS on the other, but all the wrapped S in the pool is actually being routed to Aave. So Aave would get all of the liquidity on the wrapped S side of things, which would keep the supply side of wrapped S on Aave. All of that liquidity will be stuck there for 2 years. And why that is so important, which I think is important to clarify, one of the biggest success stories for Aave across the network level has been LSTs and something called E-mode. And E-mode is essentially you can increase your collateral factor, which basically just increases the efficiency of supplying and borrowing an asset, and then supplying and borrowing an asset and supplying. Essentially what you're doing is you're taking out leverage, but you're taking out leverage specifically on an LST versus native asset. And in this instance, you would have STS and you would borrow wrapped S, you would swap into STS, you borrow wrapped S. And why that's a really important strategy is if you look at mainnet and you see some of the largest actually supply assets, you would see wrapped stake ETH, you will see Lido stake ETH, you will see Etherfi's ETH. And what people are doing there is they're basically looping it on E-mode. It's one of the most efficient sources for growth. You can basically leverage the yield of the underlying yielding asset, native yielding asset, and increase your position and therefore increase the amount of money you're making on the yield side of things. And we basically kicked that off on Aave with SDS. And then when this whole exploit happened, it actually impacted a lot of that liquidity, and a lot of that liquidity had to leave just because of unfavorable rates, but also because there was no liquidity to swap between the assets. So yeah, maybe I spoke too much, and there's specific things you want to ask about that.
There was a lot, but I think you created a very nice picture here on the additional network effects, like the value to this, because I think a lot of people do fixate on the idea that these assets only affect like the people that hold them, but there is additional value being brought to the network by having these working on Aave. It makes sense. Yankees pointing out we're on shaky ground with Aave, so kind of supporting your point here. But he does point out that we do not qualify for a deployment based on annual revenue generated. Would this help facilitate that, Nolly? Getting the revenue generation numbers up, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I think if you actually go onto that proposal and you scroll down, you see a great analysis from Token Logic. And what they do is they actually analyze each of the other deployments and they say about the potential. And they look at Sonic and they say, yeah, they can clearly see that because of the balancer exploit, it has actually had a lot of impacts on their liquidity and on STS and whatnot on Aave. But they see there is huge potential with Sonic, as we all do. They say that they believe in labs. They say that there's the potential to initiate new programs for growth. And like as mentioned, and I'm not just saying this for Sonic, if you look at any other ecosystem and Aave deployment, an LST E-mode has the potential to grow liquidity and grow revenue considerably. It's one where you can just seamlessly loop the LST versus the native asset, and you get people looping ridiculous amounts when the rates are efficient, when everything you supply outpays everything you borrow. You can leverage and increase liquidity by quite efficient means, and that creates a lot of revenue for Aave.
Fantastic. So I think there is a pretty nice. Go ahead, Daniel.
No, I just wanted to touch on a different topic. Once you're done, bud, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna try to put a pin on that because I think that was a really good point, Nolly, and I think we should clip that and post it all around. That'll help you kind of explain your position a little bit better, I think, because I think, again, I've come back to this point. The most common thing is, people feeling like it's taking money out of their pockets for some reason. Well, not some reason. There's a good reason they kind of think that too, which we can talk about there's a couple things on my mind. I got to take notes here actually, because a couple things I want to touch on before we have to wrap this up is I want to talk about structurally what Sonic should probably do to avoid this kind of thing in the future, and why the airdrop funds. But you go first, Daniel.
Yeah, there was a comment a little bit higher up from, I think it was DeFi Minimalist, which is like a narrative that, or a perspective that I've heard quite a bit, which is like, if this passes, then it's like it shows that the network isn't decentralized. But I think that this is actually like the exact opposite of that, because Sonic Labs has said they're not going to vote, they're going to sit out. So essentially, I mean, they're not going to decide this. It's essentially, it is everybody else. And so this actually shows decentralization, the DAO process in action. And that's why I think that we're actually quite not excited, but like we think that this is a really productive conversation as well too. So I would just like to try to like counter that narrative, because in my personal opinion, it's exactly not that right now.
Yeah, I think there are arguments to be made. It's a little outside my research or pay grade at the moment about like vote distribution and how voting for governance stuff works. I think we still kind of need a little clarity from labs on how things actually progress to proposals at the moment. I haven't found anything on that yet. But to your point, Daniel, I think, yes, ideally this is like a decentralized, and I've tried to tell people this before, this is a proposal on the forum. It's not even going to vote yet. So there's no real like, this is like an offer, you know, like that meme of the offer, the guy. This is an offer. You don't have to take it. We can, I mean, people are debating it now. I think it's really good for the conversation. But to that point, like, how malleable is the proposal as you've submitted it? Like, because we have a lot of numbers in terms of like how to pay back, structuring it as a loan, revenue share, this sort of thing. How did you guys reach these numbers? Is this just like a feeler, dude? Are you trying to see how Labs is willing to work with you guys, how open the community is? Because it seems like they want a bigger cut.
Yeah, I mean, it's super fair. Obviously, like this is there's two sides of this as well too, because Beets is also a DAO, and I think that that's lost in the conversation, is that if it's a massive portion of the treasury or a massive obligation, the Beets DAO is just going to vote no, because they have no reason to approve such a proposal. So we are essentially trying to find a middle ground and a place that makes sure that we can continue to build and continue to be here on Sonic and excel and essentially try to build the infrastructure that Sonic needs as well. So I think that we've been here for quite a long time, and we want to stay here. I think that probably we are one of the oldest protocols around on Sonic, previously Phantom, and we did that because we survived in the long term. And obviously, like, that is our number one priority. So we wanted to offer something that has quite a big impact on us, but does not impact our ability to continue to build and be here.
Right on. I wanted to also, I guess, ask this. This is the $1 million question here, is what happens if this proposal does not pass, if this hole cannot be filled? What is the worst case scenario for Beets?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I think that we definitely spent some time thinking about it. Obviously, we hope that this path continues. We do have commitment from Sonic Labs to recover the 5 million. I think that there is still space for us to make contributions to help make the LPs whole. But our base case of survival doesn't change, though. I think that, like, we see, I mean, it is a tough statement, but obviously, like there are terms of service. These are dangerous kind of systems that we operate in, and people are taking risk. We want to do the best that we can to help the people that were lost, but our number one priority is to Beets and to Beets survival long term as well.
Right on, right on. We gotta get into the Beets governance a little bit, maybe some other time, because we still got some stuff I want to hit. We got a lot of good questions too. Nally, I think this was kind of for you, dude. Can the current Aave staked S positions be liquidated by other LPs on unaffected dexes? This is from the Sandwich Man himself.
Sandwich Man coming out. Yeah, I mean, as far as like, I mean, I guess he's speaking to, yeah, can they actually swap through other liquidity? I mean, yeah, of course they can swap through other liquidity. I think the question is there liquidity there? I mean, the liquidity on SDS and other places is notoriously minimal. So yeah, I mean, they can still facilitate liquidations. I mean, maybe Dan, you know more on the technicals, how they actually onboard a market, but I believe they just, what do they actually route it through?
Yeah. So I mean, the main thing is that, like, if you think about a liquidation, it's always happening at the wrong moment. So you need full range. I mean, whereas like most of the STS liquidity on other dexes is concentrated within a really small range that you'll blow out of pretty quickly. And that is why after this happened, Aave essentially lowered the caps of STS, because they recognize that the liquidity to facilitate large liquidations is essentially not there at the moment.
Interesting. Another question here. What's stopping the foundation doing the S loop via Aave themselves without giving to Beets' proposal? If keeping Aave is the goal here, those revs could be added for Beets recovery. Anyone want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's like it's definitely it's, if you're thinking from a strategic point from using Labs Treasury, it's definitely a useful mechanism to have this loop and have them facilitating the loop. I guess there comes different questions as far as what they're using their treasury to do. I think the main thing is there's been a big exploit which has impacted a lot of users on the chain, sorry. And it's also the STS liquidity has been impacted. One of the things you also have to ensure for this loop to actually happen is the whole dynamic has to be profitable, in the sense that the supply side needs to outpace the borrow price you're paying. Labs could definitely help facilitate, and we actually have, I mean, I don't know if this has been alluded to, I think it's been minorly alluded to, but we have products that we are hoping to build, loops, which is actually would just simplify this whole system for everyday users who don't want to manage supply and borrow demands. And you could just basically enter into one token, which would basically facilitate this whole transaction. But to do that, to begin with, you need the liquidity base to be there. And you also need the supply and the demand costs to actually be in a profitable, efficient way. I think your point on Labs doing this is a great point, which maybe comes down the line. But before we can even begin to discuss that, is we actually need to ensure that there is a base, there is a foundation. And from our view, like, I mean, obviously, as Dan said, we focus on allowing Beets to continue to operate in an environment which is incredibly volatile and incredibly shaky. Our priorities lie to Beets, but secondly, we are Sonic native, and our priorities lie to Sonic. And even just looking from a Sonic perspective, it's like I've been in Phantom and Sonic from the early days, and it's like, okay, right, what does Sonic actually need for this kind of next stage of growth? As I've alluded to, an LST is an important factor. And I think to do that, you need that base of liquidity. And just thinking from a strategic point of view, locking in 2 years of liquidity to ensure a base to build products on, from a strategic point of view, is an incredibly efficient use of capital. Obviously, the reason we're on here is because we're discussing whether this is the right use of capital and this is the right use of funds, which, as you've mentioned, this is a proposal. We're putting it to governance because we want to see what people's perspective is. We want to see how the network reacts. And we can have these conversations and think of other ideas. But from a foundational aspect of what the chain can do to grow, locking in your potentially most important base of liquidity for 2 years, which enables DEX liquidity, enables LST liquidity, and enables lending market liquidity, and the potential for Aave to have this E mode, seems like a sensible strategic opinion in my point of view. Obviously, that is a personal point of view. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that personal point of view, Nolly, because I think that does make a lot of sense. I think it's not necessarily won me over entirely, but I can see the argument making a lot more sense now. In the, any deal, it's like, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for me in this deal? And in this deal, you're kind of pitching the idea of like a more stable base to build off of for the network to kind of start turning things around, which I think is kind of the core of the issue here, right? Maybe not the core. An important part of it, though, is let me pull up. I have a comment here. We got DeFi minimalists pointing out that they minted all these tokens for reasons that never came to fruition. So I think another part of the protocol or the proposal that has rustled a lot of feathers is specifically because you're pointing out airdrop funds and saying, we want some of these. Airdrop obviously canceled early, stopped early. All these tokens that were minted earlier this year, it's kind of up in the air what's going to happen to them. And it's also tied to governance, because governance said that they were going to be used for incentive programs to try and bring on new onboard users, incentivize activity on the network. And so kind of how you're phrasing this now is making it seem like it's kind of a similar use of these funds and that you're building a base. But I think a lot of people bring up the point, it's not necessarily going to bring a lot of new eyes to the network, which is what the funds were for, to try and bring activity to. How do you guys feel about this criticism, that it shouldn't be from these funds? Maybe Beets maybe these pools should be made whole, but not out of the airdrop funds. What do you all think about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think it's the point that's come up most. I think when we were analyzing like how we can go about this, you're essentially going, right, okay, how can we not impact the network in a sense that it's going to be creating new emissions or creating new funds or coming directly from labs? We basically looked at the airdrop and saw that there was clearly diminishing returns. Labs were slowly beginning to like reduce the amount which was going out. And our point of view was, okay, what is the highest impact of these funds in the future? It's either you extend emissions and carry on doing what you were doing, which I think has been argued that is not the most sustainable source of creating activity on the chains, and perhaps actually some of these funds were just being sold, people weren't staying around. I think from Lab's point of view, it seems like it was becoming diminishing, or you just completely end the airdrop and you burn the funds forever, which is another option. Or you could actually convert a portion of it into long-standing, long-duration, locked liquidity, which, as you said, it provides some capital. Maybe it doesn't bring new users, but it allows the users who maybe have been like the biggest, like the most trusted user base who's been around the while, maybe in this, just like, as we said, safe, non-risky LP, to feel like they should stay, and then also build a base to build new products off of, which can bring new users in. I think that was our view, that it was like, it doesn't add new dilution, it doesn't impact other people. It's a fund which looks like it's just going to end and maybe not be utilized, and we could try and think of a strategic, sensible way to use it, which could essentially kill one or two or three birds with one stone. So yeah, I think maybe Dan has some extra points to add there.
No, I think you covered it pretty good, man.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, I think the case is shaping up a lot stronger now, in that you're making some decent points, in that, airdrop didn't necessarily bring people to keep them around. It brought some temporary activity, resulted in sell pressure. This is kind of a locked guarantee for at least some amount of time. Wait, we got, sorry, a question here. Okay. Followed Zone says, that's my biggest question. How does this bring more users compared to what they were earmarked for? My worry is if SL needs more tokens for a future incentive program, they will dilute holders further. I think this kind of ties more into like the governance process itself that we still have some unresolved questions about. And I kind of think even the blowback you guys are getting is kind of tied to this as well, where there is no real written governance process Beets are taking flack because Labs is AFK and refuses to engage, says Benny. I do think some clarity on the governance process would clear things up some more. They've said they're abstaining, but I think a little bit more information on how this should progress would be good. Have you guys seen any criticisms in the forums that you have like integrated into maybe changing in the proposal?
Just to answer or just to make a statement on your previous point,
Yes,
I think this is an opportunity for us to kind of like co-define these processes as well too. I think like it's always like the labs needs to do this and labs needs to do that, but we can also we can do it together and make proposals as well too, like well-formed ones.
Yeah, going back to sorry, real quick, going back to Nally's point, dude. That's a good point. Nally said systems decentralize as a result of like stress or what do you call it? Cataclysm? I don't know, issues that arise. That's when they're forced to decentralize. So this is possibly another opportunity. But sorry, Daniel, go on.
No worries, man. What was the second question?
Dude, oh yeah, have you guys incorporated any feedback into new additions, new versions of the proposal?
I mean, obviously the one thing that has come out of it is that Sonic has agreed or had been able to kind of find a path for recovery of 5 million S, or 5.8, which I think is a massive amount of S and hugely helpful. In terms of the feedback, it's quite extreme, as I'm sure that you've seen.
It's all
so
over
I think
the
it's
place.
Yeah. Mostly just like your fools go away, which I understand and I can definitely like empathize with. But it's oftentimes it's hard to find anybody who is either like it's just too far to one side, because as we said, like at the end of the day, we can't decide either. It's the Beets DAO that has to agree to anything that we do. And similar to Sonic, we do not have overriding voting power for Beets. Beets is an old protocol. We did not have much of a supply, and we do not have the capacity to just push our will through.
I see. Yeah. So we got to dive a little bit more into Beets DAO. And look, the conversation's got to start being directly interacting with the Beets DAO then. So like this proposal was drafted in coordination with the DAO then?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we essentially outlined what we think is a compromise that we think that the Beets would also be on board with, because at the root of it, we also want to support the users that were affected and do our best to, if not make them fully whole, make them partially whole. So this is where the proposal is rooted in. And when there's statements of give everything, essentially, it doesn't really, those two things, they don't align.
Yeah. Now, final point here, because we got to wrap this up, guys. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little sleepy, a little hungry. I got to re-energize. But this is a fantastic conversation. I kind of want to bring you guys back on again to follow up on this thing as it progresses. But final point I kind of want to bring to kind of tie this all together a little bit more, because I think Dear Spence has a good point that's been on my mind. And it's kind of come up over the course of this conversation. Like, could other protocol hacks not also be included in the proposal to make it more ecosystem centric? Stability hack, for example. Like, how do you make it look like Sonic Lab is not playing favorites? I'm not necessarily going to playing favorites part, but perhaps there is a approach to this proposal in coordination with other projects or something where it is establishing a more systemic approach for these kinds of events if they were to occur in the future. So we don't have this kind of who knows what's happening. We have to kind of scramble, establishing some sort of ecosystem fund or something like that. Would that be something that you guys are keen to explore?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point. I think like the also maybe to address the question, it's like this just seems like Sonic Labs or would be showing favorites. Just want to echo the point that it's like it's not just a bailout for Beets, the company in essential. It's like making the LPs on the network who got impacted on an infrastructure which had tested the dues of time in DeFi on a piece of liquidity which was Sonic's like core liquidity stack in a sense. And it was also not just STS, there was also wrapped OS from Origin that was impacted. And our proposal would make those people in the other LST whole as well. I think, yeah, as you said, like a system has these cataclysms, I think was the word you said, but it has these things where it gets tested. Yeah, it gets tested, and you have the opportunity to go, right, okay, what should we do? How is an efficient way to go about these problems moving forward? I think, yeah, we're definitely interested in finding new ideas. I think maybe just to add to the point, it's like this whole situation has come about because we discussed and we're like, oh, we should actually begin to go to the Sonic Labs forum and propose this. And we reached out to Sonic Labs and we said, oh, where should we post? So like the whole instigation of creating this governance, as you said, has actually started about because of this procedure. Which, coming back to this original question, yeah, if maybe there is the potential to kind of put forward some idea for some recovery or some other plan, and actually do that at the network level and do that at the user level and do that at the protocol level, and kind of determine some form of governance and whatnot. I mean, that's a separate topic that comes from this, but as you said, it's like these things happen and then you have the opportunity to define new systems and put new systems in place.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's kind of a separate conversation, but it is kind of birthed or revealed through this process. You know, I think Benny even said something here. I guess the problem from a Sonic perspective is that mitigation wasn't planned. If the chain wanted to have the kind of power, it could have gone through all the steps needed. And I think this is kind of the opportunity for us as a community to step up. And if we really care about decentralization, all the like, just like Yankee saying, you know, there's nothing stopping other protocols submitting their own proposals. It's just Beets is the first to do so. You guys, look, Trailblazers on Sonic and Phantom, first to put up a governance proposal. I think I saw one other one in the forum. It was from Phantom India, Validate, the only other one. And that's kind of what I would like to see more happen here, because I think we have some good ideas, some good comments from the community. And I do think, you know, taking the lessons learned from this and creating some kind of more structured, systemic, maybe insurance fund or like critical services safety fund or something like that could mitigate a lot of the blowback you guys are getting for this proposal. But sorry, there was something else that just came up. But yeah, I would like to see the community kind of maybe move in that direction. I'd like to see 1,000 governance proposals bloom as opposed to just a bunch of FUD spreading. But I think the FUD is also kind of healthy too. It's a little, you know, conversation.
For sure, man. I just wanted to address this comment about Sonic being in the grave. Like, I think we all realize that that's not true, which is why we're all here. We all realize that Sonic has huge potential, and we're all still here backing it. And we're all trying to come up with ideas on how we can actually make Sonic progress into something. And I think Sonic in general is taking steps. They have a new CEO, they're making new strategic decisions. And now from our perspective as a community on Sonic, it's up to us to actually pit through these new strategies and build these new systems where we can build something cool on Sonic. And like having these discussions, and as Zorg is saying, like source of funds is still entirely wrong. Like maybe that's true, and maybe we should have those discussions and find other solutions. But I think for Sonic to carry on moving on and Sonic to actually progress, it has a huge community of people who are faithful to it and who have been through the runner, have had multi-chain, have had all these things happen and are still sticking around. And now is actually the opportunity to go, right, we've had enough of this shit. Let's actually design something cool and start building the foundations, being strategic with what we're doing, and actually putting our energy into like progression and growth rather than just thinking it's dead and it's the end, because I really don't think that is the case.
Yeah, right on. I love that, Nolly. That's kind of what we all need right now. We need a little bit of perspective, right? Look, Nolly and I, we've been through some shit, bros. We've been through multi-chain. All right. We know what it's like, how bad it gets out there. But yeah, it's not dead. We're not dead yet. And I echo that sentiment. We just got to start building cool shit. Make some governance proposals, dude. Try to better the network. You're a citizen of the network if you're posting about it every single day. Try to like build a little something. But I mean, that's pretty much all I got today for you guys. We got any other questions before we wrap it up? I don't know how you guys are doing on time. I think I've hit all my starred ones here. And if not, any final words from you guys, Daniel, Rasta, Nolly?
Yeah, man, would just say again, thanks so much for having us on, giving us the time to just give our perspective. And yeah, we're on Discord all the time. So if anybody wants to reach out, like, you know where we are. Like, I mean, we've been here for a long time. We hope that we get to be here for a much longer time. Obviously, this is a moment. I personally think that Beets has continued perspective, and I think that we are well positioned despite this incident. And I want to continue to build really cool shit and do it on Sonic.
Right on, dude. Let's do it, dude. That's why we're not dead yet. Sparks, you head, whatever that guy's name is. We're still building, dude. But yeah, I want to thank you guys all so much again for coming on. This is not an easy thing to do, so kudos, you know, and I want to thank the audience for being largely very respectful, because we're all adults here. We're talking business, okay? Sometimes it gets a little heated, but that's all in good fun. So yeah, thanks again, everybody, for watching. Everyone tuning in, please like, retweet, clip it, whatever. Do something. Help get the word out. And yeah, that's it for everybody. All right, I'm stumbling over my words. It's Friday, guys. I'll catch you guys later. Hopefully next Tuesday we'll have another exciting action-packed show, another great guest. So stay tuned, folks. And adios.
GM Sonic is Corval and Dracula Presley. GM.